Hi, I'm Sandra Marlowe, and some of you, of course, will know me as Sandra Dean. I grew up in Adams many, many years ago, and I now live in North Idaho. But I wish I could have come into my hometown for Laurel's celebration of life, and I'm so grateful that a group of you put this together. And with the help of technology, I'm able to at least share a few things and speak about my friendship with Laurel and make some reflections on our life and on her life. Um, Laurel and I knew each other since before kindergarten. I think we were playmates because our moms, Virginia and Rose, were friends. And looking back, do you remember the parties, the birthday parties we used to have as kids with our 1960s moms? I have a black and white photo of myself at our kitchen table up in the railroad depot, and I'm surrounded by my little schoolgirl friends. There's probably a hot dish and some buns and a jello salad on the table. And there is Laurel in the picture blowing out the candles on my birthday cake. That's how our friendship began. That photo is now in a frame fondly in my office. Laura wanted to stay at the party, as I remember it, to play, but her mom was leaving. So a neighbor, Laura Vadran, another name that some of you will remember, Laura agreed to drop Laurel off when she left. So the minute Virginia left, Laurel started crying. She was a very sensitive child, perhaps more than most of us realized. Our days of becoming friends were anchored in school years. And as a youngster, I remember Laura was pretty athletic and I was more academic. But one time she included me in this softball game with the kids that was happening in the Adams Park. And I pretty much embarrassed myself and left the game and started walking home. And Laura followed me and she joined me. And thereafter, we became best friends. I remember long walks in the summer out to the spillway behind the Hatlestad house, and I think also it was kind of behind the Lundquists. And we used to go out there to suntan, although Laurel always just burned. And I remember hours talking on the phone. This was long before texting. Even though we had probably just seen each other, we'd still be on the phone half the night. I remember taking our bikes out for early morning rides in the country, or I also remember us riding around town on our bikes and holding a punk in one hand and a string of firecrackers in the other, and lighting and tossing, and then pedaling like mad to get away from the. And I'm sure if our parents knew, they would have been more than unhappy with us. I remember hanging out at Hatlestad's house, and we would enjoy Virginia's homemade klub. I think that's what it's called. And I remember their little dog Sandy. We would play with him. And Dawn sometimes would come home, her dad, and he'd be all dusty from the work on the highway, but he always had a good sense of humor and made us laugh. And he was such a friendly man. The high school days found us kind of cruising around with girlfriends, and usually this was whoever had a car. We'd run off to neighboring towns and fairs and sometimes movies and definitely basketball games where we'd be checking out guys, of course, laughing ourselves silly, and we'd always have the music blasting in the car. Laurel and I also co-edited the school newspaper, and at the time it was called the Rocket Rap. And I remember we ended up in Mr. Klute's office because we published a spoof edition called Rocket Crap. And it was the most read edition of the year, and even the teachers were laughing in the halls over it. But we did get into a little bit of trouble. I also remember marching in the band with hangovers. We were wearing those black blazers in the hot sun, and this was after a couple late night parties, minus parents during high school. I think Laurel played in the percussion, as I recall. She did cymbals and sometimes the timpani. But I remember one of the incidents, she messed up a cymbal crash in, I think it was in the national anthem, and she couldn't live it down. She was like, "Argh." But if Laurel had a challenge in some subject in school, I was usually the one trying to help her. And she always made me nervous because she would be looking over my shoulder to get answers in psychology. And I was the worrywart. I was sure the teacher would catch us and we would both be expelled or something dreadful. And our parents would be called, even worse. After graduating high school in 79, Laurel came to California at my urging, probably, and she and I actually became roommates for, I think it was over a couple of years. Now, it was probably culture shock for the two young gals from North Dakota, but we made the most of exploring the Bay Area, and we made treks over to the ocean and to the beach. And one time we went to the Big Sur River to muse about life, and we brought guitars, and we were sitting there and singing John Denver songs. I do remember that. Laurel was quite sentimental. Fortunately, we both secured pretty decent clerical jobs in the Silicon Valley for a time. And I remember for Laurel's first job, she had to get a pre-employment physical, which was kind of customary at the time. Well, I didn't know that she had a strong aversion to blood, but I went with her because she was nervous about the appointment. And the staff, when we told them, they were afraid she would faint, so they put her on a gurney. And when the nurse left the room, literally, Laurel started jumping off the gurney and heading for the door, and I had to talk her out of leaving and practically hold her down when they came in to draw the blood. But thank goodness she got the job. She passed her physical, of course. We were happy to share rent and expenses, and one summer a bag of pot. Oh my, the memories and the munchies. I was proud at the time, I remember, of getting our grocery budget for the week down to $6.50. Seriously. I think we bought rice, a pound of hamburger, and some stewed tomatoes, and we made some goulash out of that. We probably bought a couple other staples, milk, eggs, some bread, a couple bananas, whatever. But we loved to change or to save our spare change because we would go to a place called the Cats, which was a legendary hippie joint in Los Gatos, and they had these fabulous steak dinners, and they came out on these platters sizzling from the kitchen. And another fun place we used to go for an awesome brunch was a hotel in San Jose that was pretty famous for its brunch, and it was called the LeBaron, and the waiters would just keep the champagne flowing, and that made us very happy. We had many fun times in the land of palm trees and sunshine. Through the 80s and 90s, Laurel and I spent, a lot of milestone birthdays together. Probably our 21st, 30th and 40th at least. We definitely partied more than we should. We went on ridiculous diets, did aerobics, and yo-yoed with our weight. The frustration of being fat girls had bonded us. We advised each other on questionable fashion choices, believe me. We commiserated over some of our jobs, and we shed tears over breakups. And we counseled each other with honesty and kindness during some pretty tough times. We rarely disagreed. We took trips together, sharing friends and sharing family. And eventually, we grew into smart, capable, resilient, and even sometimes thin women. We had our haughty days. When I finally got married, Laurel was my maid of honor, of course. And she threw me the best bridal shower. No kitchen doodads, only lingerie. The girl knew how to live. Laurel always reminded me to loosen up, to laugh more at life. Her sense of humor was wicked. And one story comes to mind that I want to share, and it may seem a bit inappropriate, but it is worth the recounting. Laurel accompanied me to a women's gay bar one night way back in the day where a musical friend of mine was the DJ and was doing karaoke for the club. And so I wanted to record a couple Patsy Cline tunes for my soon-to-be father-in-law. It was his birthday. And so Laurel agreed to tag along as my date. We had a fun time. We had a good time. We were up dancing, and we visited politely with a few of the patrons that were there. And I performed and got my songs recorded on a cassette, no less. Yes, that's how long ago it was. And shortly after it was maybe the next week, I received a newsletter from the club in the mail. And it had this personal note on it from a gal there who had introduced herself to us named Reba. And Reba says in the note, "Wow, really enjoyed meeting you. Would love to get together again." I was like, "What?" And I couldn't figure out how she got my address. And was I going to mention this to my fiance, Jim? So I'm in a tizzy, and I call Laurel, and I'm telling her about it, and I'm reading her the note. And as I'm reading her the note, I realize it's her handwriting, Laurel's. And she starts laughing and cannot stop. She so pranked me. She had picked up the club newsletter while we were there and wrote this note on it and sent it to me later. And I totally bought it. She never let me live that one down. So later in life, when we both had moved in different directions and moved to different parts of the country, we stayed in touch. And it was always one of those friendships where we might not see each other for a couple of years or even talk for months. But the minute we reconnected, we were like only longtime friends with so much history can be. It was always comfortable. It was always familiar. It was always supportive. And when Laurel moved back to North Dakota to be near her mom, I was coming in at the time to see my mom, who was elderly as well. And we would get together for a visit. I remember meeting up at Granny's in Grafton for breakfast and catching up on each other's lives. Although I felt that I knew Laurel pretty well, I also know she was a private person. Her dreams, her wishes, and her worries were often kept within a small circle, maybe a friend or two, and her sister Valerie. I know that Laurel wrestled over the years with hidden hurts, as well as her health and well-being in later years. Enough so that the path ahead was perhaps looking too painful. And it led to a decision to end her own life. The loss of her unique and very special presence in my life and on the planet has been heart-wrenching for me. I would usually always remember her birthday with a gift or a card, and I'd send a letter at Christmas and occasionally text her. But one of my regrets is not having stayed more directly involved with her these past few years. When I was diagnosed with uterine cancer last year, she texted me with encouraging words. And when I came through surgery with an all-clear, cancer-free, she texted me about how truly happy she was for me. And that was Laurel. Sometimes she was holding her own struggles close to the vest while listening to support others. Most of her life that I knew her, Laurel was in supportive and caregiving roles in her jobs, with her friends, and with family, caring for and serving others. She could make tough choices, and she knew how to follow through. The last text I sent her was actually to inquire about her brother Marnell, who I had heard was in the hospital. And I didn't get a response. And that concerned me and piqued my curiosity. Little did I know that at that time, she herself was hospitalized and on life support. Looking back, I realize Those formative years of our youth are so fundamentally important. The camaraderie, the connections, the shared experiences, and the shared values. Perhaps not all was good, nor was it easy, but it was part of our journeys and the treasures and influences that we got from our small community. I am so grateful for my deep friendship with Laurel. She is part of my story, a big part of my story, and part of who I have become in my life. Remember how we couldn't wait to be seniors when we were in high school? Well, now I am finally a senior. And looking back on those days is so warming to my spirit. How valuable and precious they were. Laurel and I were soulmates. There's no better word. I will miss her insights, her wisdom, her strength, some of her frank perspectives, her full laugh, definitely her impish spirit, and her beautiful soul. Godspeed and lots of love, my dearest friend. I sincerely hope we meet again. And I would like to sing a short little song for her. It's a beautiful little tune called Skylark. Skylark, have you anything to say to me? Won't you tell me where my love can be? Is there a meadow in the mist where someone's waiting to be kissed? Skylark, have you seen a valley green with spring, where my heart can go a journeying over the shadows and the rain to a blossom-covered lane? And in your lonely flight, haven't you heard the music in the night? Wonderful music, faint as a will-o'-the-wisp, crazy as a loon, sad as a gypsy serenading the moon. Oh, Skylark, I don't know if you will find these things, but my heart is riding on your wings. So if you see them anywhere, won't you lead me there? Oh, Skylark, won't you lead me there? That's for you, Laurel.